What's up, guys? Currently just on a walk, touching grass, or whatever the terminology is being used these days. Whatever is hip and cool is what I'm currently doing. So I was streaming earlier and did a couple of Wichita meta auto one-shots with no Helena comps, but they were far from consistent and not really anything original that other people haven't already done. But that is the price I have to pay when I'm a day late with my hosts. Anyway, I'm just gonna share some thoughts about the fight in general and then give you guys some tips as well as substitutions that you could use on your fleets. So first of all, starting with the battleship fleet, I pretty much ripped it off Rei Kurozuki. I will leave a link to his channel in the description of this video so you can look at all his other comps. And as for the Kearsarge one, Kearsarge is just going to be a really good pick for anything that's light armor, so that was a no-brainer. I tried using Implacable over Kearsarge along with Yorktown 2 and Enterprise, but the damage wasn't there. Kearsarge just brings too much damage. The fight itself, I don't find it too exciting because it's kind of just a stat check. Are you tanky enough and do you deal enough damage? Yes, I know it has the chains, but it's not really a mechanic that you can play around. For example, with Arizona meta, if you switch all the rudders on your Vanguard for boilers, then you can survive, regardless of whatever ships you're using. And then with Rodney meta, you just had to desync your main fleet. But although I guess it does screw over your battleship as well. But with the chains in this fight, really, all that it comes down to is your Vanguard has to be able to survive the total amount of damage that's coming their way. So it's not like you can make any changes to your equipment in order to survive them better or anything. So you just end up having to use tanky ships. Now, if you want to do a 4-strike comp, regardless of whether it's a battleship or a carrier fleet, then you're going to need one of two tanks, being Guam or Laffy 2, as they're really the only options that can hold the Eagle Union Elite Damage Control protocol, so that they can last until the end, at least somewhat consistently. And also, you don't want them to be in the tank slot, so this is very important. If you're using at least 2 battleships, then you're going to want to use Guam, but if you're using at least 2 carriers, then you should be using Laffy 2. Since they're used to survive until the end, you need to keep them in the rear position. And in my tank slot, I'm currently using Sirius because even if she survives for longer than she does in the tank position, she really only puts out a total of about 20k damage, so it's not really worth it. What I do is I use her as the tank and I give her Pearl Tears. Her carrier buffs linger after her death, so she's just a sacrifice. My Sirius is not oathed and level 120, so you don't need to uncap her to 125 to use her if you want to. And then in the middle position, Helena is obviously a good choice. I feel like Helena comps and Helena list comps are going to be equally as consistent from what I can see for now. But also you can use Plymouth. That is always going to be a good choice as long as you're not using all carriers in your main fleet, which I don't think is a good choice for this fight. It's been a while since the meta fights have output a lot of Vanguard pressure, so now we have to go back to some actual fleet building, and we can't just slap like Taijuan and Hindenburg and just melt the boss. One ship that I probably underrated and didn't think would be that good is Guam, because obviously she has the ability to hold the Manju Ox, the damage control protocol, but also she applies a permanent armor break debuff as long as the top ship in your main fleet is a battleship. So if you don't need any slows, then Guam's gonna both last longer and provide more armor break than Aegir. So she is definitely a top option there. And then another ship that is kind of underrated is Shangri-La. I've tried using Hornet 2 in the past as a substitute for Enterprise to be more consistent before Shangri-La's Augment was a thing. And the problem with Hornet 2 is that Yorktown 2's reload buff only gives 8% reload to Essex class carriers, but 10% to Yorktown 2. So as a result, Hornet 2 couldn't get 4 strikes with the same setup as Enterprise. But what I forgot was that Shangri-La's augment actually gives 15 reload, which is huge, so she works perfectly fine. For the fleet that I uploaded with Enterprise, you can just replace it with a level 125 Shangri-La with the augment, and it will work. If you're using Alsace, you're gonna want to use a French Vanguard in order to make her debuff permanent, and your choices there are gonna be Brest as well as Mogador. On Brest, I think Unzengun is gonna be a good option, especially if you're using her along with Guam, because I'm sure most people don't have 2+13 Azuma guns. All Brest gets for using large caliber guns is more frequent barrages, but I don't think that the barrages make up for the difference in damage between a +13 Unzen gun and a +10 Azuma gun. The raw DPS difference is just too much there, especially considering the enemy doesn't have any shields. In campaign where there are shields as well as multiple enemies, you should probably stick to the Azuma gun, but in this fight, it seems that Unzen gun is likely going to be the better choice, especially if you have it at +13. And then you can leave your Azuma gun on Guam instead. So Brest is primarily used as a tank who can make Alsace's debuff permanent, and you can also use Mogador instead. Even though in normal circumstances she's not super tanky, due to the fact that she can blink out of the chains and go invulnerable once every 12 seconds, she actually has a pretty decent time surviving until pretty late into the fight compared to conventionally tanky ships like large cruisers. So instead of Brest, you can use Mogador, if you have her raised, to make Alsace's debuff permanent. Make sure you use the Pearl tier. For carrier fleets, obviously you just leave it on Sirius and have her die ASAP, but on the battleship fleet, you can either use it on Brest, which is what I did, or you could use it on Plymouth, and it should work as well, but I find that having your tank who dies first, using the Pearl tier leads to better results. There's a huge bumblebee. It looks like the size of my big toe, just buzzing around there. Sorry. Anyway, as far as main fleet options go, I find that all carriers is lacking a bit in damage, so anything from 3 battleships to 1 battleship like Kearsarge plus 2 carriers should work. And if you're using Helena, then I recommend going for a 3-strike setup as opposed to a 4-strike setup, so that you only have to survive until about 15 to 13 seconds remaining in the fight to get off all of your damage. One comp that Chinese players have been trying out with some success, from what I've heard, is Kearsarge, Alsace, plus Yorktown 2 in the main fleet. And then in the Vanguard, they're using, I believe, Brest, Helena, and Guam, which, makes sense. Anyway, from all the comps that I've tried so far, I haven't found anything that I can call consistent, so I'm going to keep trying a bunch of different other fleets in the upcoming days, and if I find anything that's particularly good, I'll make sure to let you guys know. And that's pretty much it for this video. Thanks for watching. Peace.